I thought I'd spend a few minutes babbling on about this engine I've got disassembled and cleaned up. I didn't go through the links to clean this engine up like I normally do because a lot of the things, like the discoloration on this crankcase, these little spots here, there's no way I'm going to be able to get those clean. So I'm not even going to bother with that. Unfortunately, this is a very low time, excuse me, a very low runtime engine, but the exterior wouldn't show that. So I just thought I'd talk about a few of these parts before I go ahead and finish the assembly. I do have a new set of bearings that I've got installed here, front and rear. Crankshaft, kind of interesting how it's shaped and all, but really nothing too exciting there. Now the head is something that I think is somewhat exciting, and interesting I should say, not exciting. With this split rocker head, which I do like that design, I was curious how they actually retained these rocker arms in here. Now if you look, let me zoom in on this a bit more and see if the camera focuses. So I'm looking, I'm like, wow, I don't really see any retention screws or anything. If those of you that are familiar with Sato's, one side is of the retention, or the arm here, or the boss is threaded, and a grub screw just screws in there. But this is, in my opinion, a superior design, whereas it's just a pin. There's nothing holding that in aside from the valve cover. So what that means is that it would not be a recommended thing to do to run this engine without those covers on. So those valve or rocker covers are an integral part of this engine, which you should never run without, whereas on Sato engines or an Enya engine, you can actually run with the valve cover off because there's nothing that's going to happen. Here, this pin could easily walk out and then that thing's gone. But I do think that that's a nice thing, because then you don't really have to sit and worry about, am I going to have to, be real careful, do I have to heat this up and get that thing out? They just slid right out real nice. Now the other thing I thought was kind of funny that I was just noticing is that it's retained by 4 head screws. Now if you look, all 4 of those screws are the same length. But when you go to put them in the head, you'll notice that they don't all protrude the same depth. The 2 on the end go a lot deeper than the 2 on the sides. To me, that's a bit odd. I mean, that's just not a good design in my opinion. Sure, there's enough thread there to retain it, but why would you do something like this? I can see maybe having longer screws for these two so that they all thread in equally, but that is something I'm not really a big fan of. So in my opinion, that's kind of silly. The other thing with the 4 screws only, let me zoom out here a little bit more so my camera doesn't keep having a hard time focusing, is that this one here is in a position such that, this isn't an Allen wrench, but it'll serve as a demonstration tool. It's in such a position that it's going to be really hard to try and torque it, because you don't really have a whole lot of freedom of movement here. And if you end up having to use, say if this was an Allen wrench, if you had to put it on here like this, that's really not a good way to try and get any torque on it, because if you have ball drivers like I have, those balls very easily round out. So this head has got some good things and some bad things that I don't particularly care for, and those are the things there. Now, those of you that have seen the other 2 videos saw how nasty this muffler was. This is as good as I'm going to be able to get it. I soaked it in LA's Totally Awesome Cleaner for a long time, and there's just some of the stuff that just is not going to come off. And maybe this is blasphemy, but what I used on this a lot of was a piece of 2000 grit sandpaper that was heavily oiled, and I used that to kind of scrub that down, and that was really the only thing that was able to clean this thing up to this degree even. So that's kind of what I had to do there, unfortunately. This carb, I just took the throttle or the barrel out. I had it freed up. I opened it, or I oiled it up and heated it up the other day. and it was free, and then I came back and touched it today and it was stuck again, so I was like, okay, I gotta take that out. So I just took this retaining screw out here, heated it up, got it moving, took this screw out, pulled this out, and just cleaned this all up with LA's Totally Awesome Cleaner. Basically all I do is I just dip a Q-tip in a awesome, Totally Awesome Cleaner, get it wet, and just go in there and it cleans that stuff up real good. Dry it, oil it, now this thing's good to go. There was something that a viewer responded to and commented on my video that I thought that I validated and thought was kind of interesting, and that is that this connecting rod is bushed at the crank pin side, but it isn't bushed at the piston side. At first I wasn't sure, because I didn't really take the connecting rod off the piston. I didn't see any need to do that. I've got it moving free enough there, so I didn't feel that necessary. But you can see by looking in there, sure enough, it isn't bushed. So, you know, that's another one of those things where I don't know why they would do that. Is this a different type of material? Is it harder? Do they not worry about that wearing? Is this just a cost-saving measure? I don't know. And this crankcase says Japan on it. It doesn't say made in Japan, it just says Japan. So quite honestly, I'm not even sure where this engine is made. This could just indicate that this crankcase casting is from Japan. I don't know. I didn't get a box with this, and I believe I had somebody on RCG tell me that the box even says made in China. So who the hell knows where this engine's really made? All I know is that the crankcase says China, and we're noticing some things, because I know in the past OS used to bronze bush or bush both ends of the crank connecting rod. This one isn't. Is that good or bad? I don't know. Only those that have owned these things for a long time would tell. Would be able to fill in on that. Here's the push rod covers, and I kind of mentioned these on one of the other videos, in that they're polished aluminum and machined parts and really nice, and probably contribute about $50 to the price of this engine, whereas Saito and Enya and all the other older OS ones just had standard looking tubes that weren't polished, nothing special, but they were functional. These look really cool, they're functional, but they do add to the price of the engine. Anything like this that requires machining, you know, that kind of thing like that's going to add to the price. So this is where, you know, I'm kind of disenchanted with some of the later OS engines, because some things just don't seem to make sense. But anyway, that's a look at these parts. Basically the next step is just to reassemble this engine and then run it.